Think Trump's a beloved figure coast to coast? Not even close. Some states aren't just rejecting him, they're leading a full-blown resistance. Imagine cities erupting in protest the second his name is mentioned. You'll hear stories of resistance that go way beyond politics. Because in these places, Trump represents more than a party. He represents everything they're fighting against. 10. California. If there's one state that wears its anti-Trump stance like a badge of honor, it's California. From the bustling cities to the coastal towns, the Golden State has made it loud and clear. Trump is not their guy. His presidency sparked a wave of resistance in California unlike any other. This wasn't just political opposition, it was cultural warfare. Hollywood celebrities used their global platforms to roast him. Silicon Valley execs openly criticized his tech policies, and state lawmakers filed dozens of lawsuits against his administration. California's sanctuary policies stood in direct defiance of his immigration crackdown, and the state's aggressive push for climate action clashed hard with his environmental rollbacks. And the public? They marched in the streets, organized, voted, and kept the pressure on. Cities like Los Angeles and San Francisco turned into protest hotspots. Universities turned up the heat with public statements, and even small towns joined in with symbolic resolutions against his policies. Trump once called California out of control, but to many Californians, that just confirmed they were doing something right. In their eyes, opposing Trump wasn't just politics, it was defending the soul of the state. 9. New York. Trump may have been born in Queens and built his empire in Manhattan, but the Empire State has turned its back on him in spectacular fashion. New York didn't just vote against Trump, they rejected the very idea of him. From Times Square protests to editorial takedowns in local papers, the sentiment is raw and relentless. His feud with his hometown began the moment he descended that golden escalator. The liberal core of New York City saw Trump as a betrayal, an insult to their values of diversity, tolerance, and activism. When he demonized immigrants, he was going after their neighbors. When he targeted sanctuary cities, he was attacking their very identity. Even beyond the 5 boroughs, the rejection echoed statewide. Upstate college towns, Long Island suburbs, even former GOP enclaves soured on his antics. Trump Tower, once a symbol of wealth and success, became a magnet for protesters and controversy. This wasn't just about policy, it was personal. The state that watched him rise also watched him fall, socially, politically, and morally. His relationship with New York is now one of distance, lawsuits, and disdain. In a place that once celebrated ambition, they saw in Trump something else entirely: narcissism without purpose. Massachusetts has always been a bastion of liberal thought, but when Trump entered the picture, the state took its resistance to another level. Here, opposition wasn't just emotional, it was intellectual, calculated, and deeply rooted in history. This is the land of Harvard, MIT, and a political legacy that includes the Kennedys. Trump's anti-science rhetoric, his denial of climate change, and his attacks on education were more than disagreements. They were direct affronts to everything Massachusetts stands for. When Trump mocked experts, the Bay State doubled down on research, policy, and grassroots movements. Residents across the state took to the streets, from Boston Common to tiny towns with homemade signs in windows. The state government openly clashed with federal mandates. Attorney General Maura Healey even sued the Trump administration dozens of times. Trump's image here wasn't just poor, it was toxic. He embodied a level of chaos and cruelty that Massachusetts voters simply couldn't stomach. And when he tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act, the state that pioneered universal health care took that as a personal insult. In Massachusetts, opposing Trump became almost a civic duty. Tiny Vermont might not have the population of California or New York, but it punches far above its weight in political identity. And its message to Trump was loud and clear: no thanks. This is Bernie Sanders country, where progressive ideals aren't just slogans, they're lifestyle choices. Universal health care, climate responsibility, and social equity are baked into Vermont's political DNA. Trump, with his attacks on all three, was never going to get a warm welcome. Even rural Vermonters, often seen as prime Trump demographics elsewhere, bucked the trend. This wasn't about red versus blue, it was about integrity. Vermont voters prize independence and authenticity, and Trump's brand of bombast didn't pass their smell test. The state saw record turnout, and Trump's share of the vote was embarrassingly low. Activism here took quieter forms: town hall statements, protest art, policy forums, but it was just as passionate. The state legislature passed resolutions condemning Trump-era policies, and even local school boards got involved. In Vermont, rejecting Trump wasn't trendy. It was consistent with their values: quiet, firm, and absolutely unwavering. Illinois is often defined by its contrasts: rural farmland and sprawling metropolis, old industry and new tech. But when it came to Trump, the state was remarkably unified, not a fan. Chicago was the beating heart of resistance, hosting some of the country's largest anti-Trump rallies. The city's progressive leadership stood in stark defiance of his policies, turning every attack on urban centers into fuel for local organizing. But even beyond the Windy City, resistance brewed. In the suburbs and even in farm counties hit hard by trade wars, people began to question if Trump's promises were just smoke. Manufacturing didn't return. Healthcare was threatened. Unions, which form a powerful political bloc in Illinois, watched Trump's labor stance with increasing concern. The state also has a long history of political engagement, and Trump's style clashed harshly with that tradition. Where Illinois voters valued coalition building, Trump seemed only to divide. Where they supported social programs, Trump moved to gut them. By 2020, the shift was obvious. The blue wave wasn't a ripple, it was a roar. Illinois voters weren't just done, they were motivated, and their votes made it crystal clear. Oregon is known for its forests, mountains, and passionate politics, and Trump found himself at odds with all three. From the start, his administration clashed with Oregon's deeply held environmental and social values. The state's cities, particularly Portland, became hotbeds of protest. When Trump sent in federal agents to quell demonstrations, Oregonians didn't back down. They ramped up. Protesters filled the streets nightly, demanding racial justice and pushing back against authoritarianism. But Oregon's resistance wasn't limited to urban centers. Rural communities, traditionally more conservative, began turning as they saw environmental policies threatening their way of life. Logging restrictions and land management rules were replaced by short-term corporate gain, and that didn't sit well with locals who depend on sustainability. Trump's handling of the pandemic and wildfires also pushed Oregon further away. The sense that federal leadership was absent or hostile drove people to act locally, with mutual aid groups, community clinics, and state-level protections taking over where Washington failed. In Oregon, resistance wasn't chaos, it was community-driven clarity. Up in the rainy Pacific Northwest, Washington state turned its clouds into thunder. Trump's time in office triggered one of the most proactive resistances in the country: legal, cultural, and relentless. Seattle became a symbol of defiance. Tech giants like Amazon and Microsoft clashed with Trump over immigration bans and internet regulation. Scientists and engineers, fed up with anti-intellectualism, took to the streets for the March for Science. Environmental groups went into overdrive when Trump exited the Paris Accord. But it wasn't just the elites. Teachers, union workers, indigenous leaders, everyone had something at stake. And Washington's leadership answered. The state sued the federal government over and over, winning key cases on healthcare, immigration, and more. Even traditionally, purple districts shifted deep blue by the end of Trump's term. The combination of civic engagement and policy pushback created a united front that few other states matched. Washington didn't just protest, they outmaneuvered. Hawaii. Far from the mainland but deeply involved in national politics, Hawaii's rejection of Trump was a cultural landslide. The state's spirit of aloha clashed with nearly every element of Trump's worldview. Diversity is a fact of life here, not a political stance. When Trump rolled out the Muslim ban, Hawaii took him to court, fast. Elected officials spoke with one voice: "This administration doesn't represent us." Locals rallied for inclusivity, environmental care, and collective welfare. Trump's stance on climate change hit especially hard. Rising sea levels are a daily concern in Hawaii, and his rollback of environmental protections felt like a betrayal. Tourists may come for the beaches, but residents knew what was really at stake. Hawaii's rejection wasn't just vocal, it was decisive at the ballot box. Trump pulled some of the lowest numbers of any modern Republican. To many, his leadership represented disrespect, and in Hawaii that's the ultimate offense. Maryland. Maryland sits just outside the nation's capital, and that proximity makes it uniquely sensitive to the mood in D.C. which during the Trump years was nothing short of turbulent. From Baltimore to Bethesda, Marylanders pushed back on Trump's rhetoric and policies hard. The state's diverse population felt the impact of immigration shifts, healthcare threats, and policing controversies deeply and personally. Progressive lawmakers in Maryland didn't wait. They mobilized fast, using the state's legislative muscle to blunt federal overreach. Education and social services, pillars of Maryland life, were on the chopping block in Trump's budgets. In response, local governments doubled down, refusing to let federal pressure erode their programs. The rejection wasn't just policy-based, it was emotional. Trump's divisive language about cities hit close to home, especially after his infamous comments about Baltimore. The backlash was swift and unified. Maryland's opposition became not just resistance, but a blueprint for how states could push back effectively. Washington, D.C. No list would be complete without the capital itself, Washington, D.C. The city Trump was supposed to lead became the symbol of resistance during his presidency. From the Women's March the day after his inauguration to mass protests throughout his term, the streets of D.C. told a story that polls alone could not. Government workers, federal employees, legal experts. This was ground zero for opposition. Trump's relationship with the press, with the judiciary, with Congress. It all played out within a few square miles. And the residents of D.C. watched it unfold with growing disbelief and disapproval. The district voted against him with historic margins. His policies affected their city directly, yet their voices were often sidelined because of D.C.'s unique political status. That only fueled the determination. When Trump cleared protesters from Lafayette Square for a photo op, the world saw it. And D.C. residents felt it. It wasn't just about politics, it was about justice. So, what do these 10 states have in common? It's more than just blue votes, it's values, it's culture, it's a vision of America that clashed with Trump's at every turn. From the West Coast to the East, from the heartland to the islands, millions stood up and said, "Not in our name." Now it's your turn. Do you agree with their stance, or do you think they've got it all wrong? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're into bold takes and deep dives, hit that like button and subscribe. We've got more coming.